Hi, Vinod.
Right. Right. So her session is finally visible in that sessions, and the chat also she reached out, but I sent some message yet to get a reply.
Let us, now that the session is visible, let us wait patiently here.
Yeah,
I'm
no, I
sure
mean,
she would.
if she's facing any issues or something, that's what I'm just wondering.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been good we have some form of other contact.
At least a
Reach out
phone
to.
or something. No, we could have had a WhatsApp chat, but then
Yeah.
they have not asked any phone connects from the speakers. I know because I am one of them. See, for today's, I'm having a little bit of Wi-Fi issue. So if I find that it has not stabilized by evening, no, I'll send my presentation to you.
Oh,
I
okay.
can at least join on phone or something, or even on a spotty connection. But if this sharing doesn't work, no, I'll have it as a backup with you.
No problem. Send me across. Mm. Is it fine if I address you as Neha?
Sure.
It's just that whenever you're talking fast, sometimes
It's a long name, isn't it?
no, it's a very nice name, but it's just that
But
during
still, it's a long one. Yes, I
it's a
realize.
long one. Yeah.
Yes, I do realize.
Because in offices, even the shorter names are shortened even more. So you're used to those kind of stuff.
Mine, some people do. Interestingly, people in Thailand and Indonesia pronounce my name perfectly.
Okay, 1 second.
Even in their
She's
language.
she's
Okay.
kind of messaging something.
Sure, sure, sure. You take first focus that.
Hi, Rutra.
Hey, hi Vinod, hi Yamai.
So did you face any issues?
No, I think it was pretty easy. It just took me time to figure out who's going to help me.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was trying. I reached out to you
We
on
are all
LinkedIn.
here. We're all yours.
Cool. So, what are the next things? Like, how do we get going?
Yes.
You are already live, and we just get started. Over to you, Vinod.
Yeah. So, Rucha, hi everyone. So today we have Rucha Ramchandra Kapre, who's going to be talking about small changes, a topic called small changes, big impact. And Rucha, you could take over and introduce yourself and start with the topic.
You have something to share, Richa, some
Yes,
material?
yes.
You would be seeing a small computer with a red slash in the, you could use that to share.
Perfect. Cool. I'll share my screen and then just let me know when is it that we can begin.
Sure.
You can begin anytime. We will tell you. I'm just switching off my video, Richa, so that we can, have a focus on you where it is deserved right now. So I'm just switching off my
Sure.
video.
Just let me know if you're able to see my screen.
Yes, we are.
Awesome. And we're good to begin as well, right?
Yes, please go ahead. Rucha.
Perfect. Just one more question, Vinod. Just in case I need a few inputs from participants, they are
Sure.
fine to share their inputs on the chat box, right?
Yes. So in the questionnaire, I'll collate the questions and answers. So in the end of the session, I'll just read out to you, help you read out that, and you could answer that.
Perfect. Just in between, I might need some help from you to read out a few things people might post when I ask them a few questions.
Sure.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so
You,
much.
just to let you know, you can also have a chat window. You can see that as well. But I'm there always to help you out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Vinod and Snehamai. Hello, everyone. A very good evening and a good afternoon for all the global audience who has joined us today. I am Rucha Kapre, and after the wonderful session that was given on the Dabbawalas, I think all of us kind of can make it now, like how a small sticker can make such a huge impact or change things or solve a problem which for which the quantum is so big. So not all big problems need to have like very big or overwhelming solutions to be implemented over a long time. Even some small changes can help trigger those things for us. So that's pretty much the topic of my talk for today. Just before we begin, I would request all the participants to just think about one thing that they are grateful for or are thankful for in the past 3 or 4 months that have gone by. So just take a minute. Um, in the chat box, answer in a word or two things that you've been thankful for. And I see some really interesting replies. Being with family, fresh air, being with mom, being not affected, good health, having a job, thankful for who the person is. And I see some really interesting inputs from people. So thank you so much for paying heed to my request. And we will shortly understand why I asked this question. But now moving on to the topic, just before we begin, a very quick introduction. I am Rucha Kapre, the head of business analysis for Springer Nature Digital in Pune. I'm born and brought up in Pune, and I'm really passionate about the city. There are a few more things that I really love. One is traveling. Unfortunately, it's not happening at all these days. But yes, there are a lot of other things like reading. I love dogs as well. And in whatever free time I have, I am associated with a few social causes. And on a professional note, I love taking and attending trainings. I'm an agile coach as well. So that's a very short introduction about me. just to ensure that the session is interactive, I have one more question to you before we begin with the actual thing. Now that we've spoken about what we were thankful for, what I would like you to think about is the biggest challenge that you've been facing right now, or maybe you've been facing from the past 3 or 4 months. So take a few more seconds, and if you're comfortable, drop in your responses in the chat box and I'll pick up a few. Yes, of course. Working on multiple roles, keeping kids engaged. I can relate to it. I see a lot of people around. Work-life balance, staying positive. Yes, it has been difficult. Dealing with anxiety, internet issues, of course, and dealing with all the negativity around COVID. So the list is going on and on, but I'll switch on to the presentation and let's talk about how we can see how we can solve these challenges. So whenever we face any difficulty or any challenge, the instant reaction as humans is 85% of the time, what we think is we don't have control over anything and we really feel helpless. That might also lead to a lot of negativity, which I also saw in the responses. And it's very human, it's very natural. It makes us feel very helpless and eventually shows up like depressive tendencies as well. And this is the natural human reaction to it. Considering that we live in a VUCA world, which necessarily means it's a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, we often face these situations either in our personal or in our professional lives. Now, I need not explain more about it. We are already in one such situation. So if we are facing these problems or difficulties or challenges day in and day out, both in our personal and professional lives, does that mean that we are always going to be like depressed or always feel helpless about it? Definitely not. So imagine you are in one such situation and yet you end up getting great results. Wouldn't that be awesome? But how do we do it? So whenever we face a challenge, there are still a few things which we call as the 15% solution. So a 15% solution is similar to moving a few rocks to change the course of a river. And this has happened, you might have read about it in schools or in news, that this happens over a period of time. Rivers might change their course, and that might happen just by changing a few things. It might occur naturally most of the times, but it does happen. So now relating 15% solution to your problem, just think about what is it that you can do best without more resources, without having to take permissions from people, or without having more authority. So maybe more money, more time at hand, or without having to take permissions, by just doing the simple things that are in your control. So if I have to relate it with the keynote that we just heard about, so what was in there to do something which wouldn't also affect their Six Sigma rating, but which wouldn't need a lot of resources, which wouldn't need a lot of other things in place. Just a simple idea of a sticker, and they worked with it, they found it to be good, and they continued with it. So now to the problem that you highlighted in the beginning in the chat box, think about and do this individually and introspect for a minute or so. What is the 15% solution to your problem that you just spoke about or you just added to the chat window? What is it the best that you can do now without having a lot of freedom to act, or without having a lot more resources? And I'm going to give you a few more seconds to see if there are any responses in the chat window. Okay, accepting the situation. I think that's a good start. Upskilling, definitely. adapting to it? Yes. So there were a few concerns around keeping kids engaged. What are the things that you could do to keep the kids engaged? Being positive, being motivated, staying focused, counting the blessings. It's always nice to be grateful. Motivate more. Discipline, having attitude and commitment. Absolutely. And I would let the responses come in. But moving on, basically, how will it help? Or if you've already thought of your 15% solution, how it might have helped you is it takes you away from blockages, from a very, very negative attitude to something very positive, which helps you build and boost confidence. So it's in a way something like, you have you know the problem, and instead of feeling helpless, you can find solutions, eventually boosting the confidence. So you know that you have control over the situation at least a bit, and you're doing best that you could do. It helps people discover the individual and collective powers. So an activity like this could be done individually or could be done with groups of people as well, and I will talk about how it can be done with groups of people eventually. The third and the most important thing is there's always a leeway of 15% where you can perform your stuff without having more resources. Like there's always some unused capacity, there's always some unused resources or some unused ideas which eventually can be used when you give it a thought. So this kind of, you can call it as the out of box thinking. And the next thing is problem solving or planning activity where you want individuals to take initiative. So if I have to give you an example, imagine that as a team, you're facing great problems. Okay. What can you do about these problems? So either you can brainstorm and ask, give a problem to the team and ask them that, this is the problem. Now, individually, tell me what is it that you can do to help solve this problem. So take individual reactions first and then let them discuss as a group and brainstorm. Okay. The best use that I can see is in retros as well. So in a retro, you could just say that, so and so has happened. Now, rather than looking back, looking forward, what are the best things that we could do to leverage the unused capacity? What is it that we can do now without having to ask for more things? So that's definitely one of its use as well. So this is all about 15% solution. So what exactly did we do here? So what we did is we introduced a very, very small change, a change in a way we think by replacing a conventional way of doing things to something very unconventional. So what we've done is necessarily we have replaced a conventional microstructure with something called as a liberating structure. And I can talk more about what a microstructure is. So now think about on a very different level. What we've been speaking till now is on a personal level. Now think about in a professional or a group or an organizational setting. How often do you face situations which are like deadly boring meetings? Deciders are separate from the doers, and you have brain numbing presentations where just one speaker or one person has the control and keeps on talking about things. Uh, Often difficult conversations are avoided. Teamwork doesn't feel like it's being a team. There's a lot of fear and politics. You take a lot of trainings. You as managers, you might be training your colleagues. You might be taking those trainings yourselves, but there are no real changes. And a lot of times situations where we exclude a few people because the decisions might be complicated, and the list can go on and on and on. So how many of you have been facing these challenges? A quick vote, like any of these challenges, either yes or no. I think for all the questions that I've asked so far, there have been like ample responses on this one in a few seconds itself, and all of them say a yes. So It's a very, very relatable challenge, I would say. So, can anything be done about the above scenarios that we just discussed about? Of course, yes. And who is it that would be doing these changes? Who is responsible for making these changes? I would say it's of course us. And how? By using something called as liberating structures. Either you might have heard about it, or even if you've not heard about it, what I would be talking about is a few structures and how I have practically implemented those. So as a business analyst, I have to facilitate a lot of meetings and don separate hats, sometimes conducting user interviews, sometimes gathering requirements, sometimes running workshops. And these liberating structures have been really handy for me. And why is it that we are going to solve the problems for ourselves? Because too often we rely on experts to design the worlds that we live in without overlooking what talents we ourselves have or talent people in our group have. And that's the very reason if we are facing a problem, if we devise a solution for it, it's much more relatable and it's much more practical. And that this is where a liberating structure can help you find these solutions. So what exactly are liberating structures? And the surprise factor is you've already experienced one, which was called as the 15% solution. So 15% solution, just to summarize, is nothing but finding a way through which you solve your own problems just by doing some out of the box thinking about a possibility which will help you solve the same problem without having a lot at your hand. The definition of liberating structures, it helps you introduce very, very tiny shifts. So as humans, we really don't like change. But if you make the change seem very, very small, very tiny, and over a period of time, if you look back, all those tiny changes have really come together to make a substantial change in the way we meet, plan, decide, and relate to one another. These structures can be used with any number of people. It could be like thousands of people, or it could be a small group. So there's no restriction really. And the formal definition is these are like really easy to learn microstructures, and I will explain what a microstructure is that enhance the relational coordination and trust between us. And I think this is a very, very important factor because a lot of times, if you've realized that in a group of people, there might be a few who are really good at communication skills and have good ideas as well. And as leaders or as team members, we tend to take inputs from these people frequently. But we need to realize that over a period of time, what happens is we kind of get similar ideas. If we're not leveraging everyone's ideas from the team and we focus on a limited group, and there might be a few people who really talk less, maybe they are shy or maybe the communication, the language, the ideas are great, but a lot of us might have studied in a vernacular medium where English is not the first language, and these people might shy away from speaking. But whenever they do speak, whenever they do make their ideas heard, these ideas could be really groundbreaking. So what liberating structures help is they put all people on a spotlight, but it's kind of in a positive way where people can really talk about their suggestions or ideas in a free way. So it helps lively participation in any group size, making it possible to include everyone. That's one. And because you're including everyone, you're automatically unleashing a lot of different ideas from everyone. So it's kind of disruptive innovation that can replace more controlling and constraining approaches with just one speaker talks or there's just one person who tells what needs to be done and others do it. Cool. This might sound too good to be true, but believe me, I have been using it and I can vouch for it, and I will explain how it might work best for you as well. So basically, so if it's that good and if it's that easy, who are the people who can use it? So really anyone who's interested in leading a change. So there have been schools, hospitals majorly, agencies, government organizations, businesses, colleges, universities who have been using liberating structures with proven results, and there are a lot of case studies around it as well. It could be these people, or on an individual level, it could be anyone who facilitates meetings. So as a Scrum Master, you might be facilitating a lot of meetings. As an architect or as a team member or as a business analyst, you might be facilitating a lot of meetings or conversations. It's for anyone from a C-suite level to regular employees. And what are the things that you need? Really, no special training or talent is required. Only mastery is the key. And there are a few steps that need to be followed, and we will see how. So basically, this is all about who can use it. These are the two gentlemen, Keith and Henry, who introduced these awesome concepts. And a liberating structure can be basically broken down into two things. One is a microstructure, and the other is a design element. Now, let's first understand what a microstructure is. To understand it, I will give you a few examples of conventional structures. So a conventional microstructure is a presentation just given by one person, a managed group where just the facilitator talks, open discussions where only a few people get to talk, brainstorming sessions where again limited few people might talk. So these are microstructures. So any small way through which you want to achieve something is a microstructure. And the new way, the unconventional way, are the liberating structures on the right. So it's basically a beautiful menu of 30 plus small activities, if you would want to call them, which you can use for specific occasions. For example, some of these you might be able to use for conducting a retrospective. Some of these you might be able to use for conducting a stand-up. Some of these for sprint planning meetings. Some of these for brainstorming and gathering requirements from your users. And n number of things. So basically, on the right, the table that you see is the 30 plus structures or 30 plus small activities, which you don't have to do all at a time. You can just pick the activity that's the most relevant to you and use it for the activity that you've planned. So this is basically a microstructure. Then what is a design element? It sounds really fancy, but it's really very simple. It just talks about whenever you want to perform any given activity, what do? You usually make an invitation. So in our context, you might just send an invite to a few number of people and you decide that you would do it in a physical room, or you might do it on a Zoom call or in a virtual environment. You distribute participation. So you decide who would participate and who would not. You configure groups. So basically, how many people in one group, how would groups be set up, how many people in one group, and then you arrange a space, as I mentioned. Either it could be a meeting room with round tables, or it could just be an open hall where people can mingle. And eventually, what is the sequence of this activity? What steps do you perform, like step 1, 2, 3, and how much time do you allocate for each step? So let's understand the concept of a design element with the 15% solution that we did. So basically what I did is making an invitation. I made an invitation by asking you a question, which is, what is the biggest challenge you're facing right now? So you could do this with an individual, like just I did, or you could do it with a group of people. So I've just done half the activity. The actual impact would be when you repeat it in particular cycles, which I will explain. How do you distribute participation? So imagine we are doing this in a group. So everyone is included. That's how you distribute the participation, and everyone has an equal opportunity to contribute. How do you configure groups? So whenever you ask this question, ask people to first introspect, think about it individually. Okay, give them a minute or so. Once they've done that, then you ask them to pair. Like two people discuss it. Like I discuss it with my partner discusses it with me. Like this is my problem and this is the 15% solution that I think about. And then later you can also discuss it in groups. How is the space arranged? Unlimited people. If you want chairs, you can have those, or it could be a big hall, and no tables or chairs required. So in a virtual setting, there are different ways of doing this as well. And there's ample information available. But for the purpose of this, I can just talk about the physical setting, and feel free to get in touch with me to how to implement this in a remote environment. That kind of is the need of the hour as well. And the last segment of the design element is how do you sequence it. So first alone, as I mentioned, everyone generates ideas. You give them like 2 to 3 minutes or 5 minutes max. Then individuals share their ideas with groups, 2 or 4 people, and then together groups discuss their ideas and you provide advices to each other. And then you can say that, you thought about engaging children with some activity, you might also want to do this. And one very good example that I can give of this is I read an article about it. So there's a group in Bangalore, and homeschooling is very, very difficult, right? Like, for example, if I have to homeschool my children, then I have to spend like an hour every day. And this is just an example. Likewise, there might be some other parents who are spending an hour as well. So what they did is, and nobody knew each other, they just formed a group and they said that let's vote in and decide who's going to take the session for our kids today. So like we do meetings for offices, like parent one said, I can do a session for all the children who have joined this group today, and someone else can do it tomorrow. So what necessarily happens is I don't have to spend like 1 hour every day with my children. Of course I do, but for some extracurricular activities and to learn something new as well, this is the 15% solution that they thought about in the available time and resources that they had. So moving back to the previous slide, we just saw what the design elements are. So we made an invite, we saw who the participants are, we saw how are we going to configure them, we saw what space is needed, and we also saw how are we going to sequence and what activity is going to take how much time. Okay. So this was the first out of the 30 plus liberating structures we saw. And again, there's no sequence. You can pick things as you like. This can be an awesome activity for a workshop, which is how it was planned earlier. But due to the setting of the conference, now we've moved to a virtual environment. But thankfully, I'll be able to cover more structures and then you can try those out with your teams as well. So let's understand about a few more structures. So the first and the most important that I feel is impromptu networking. So if you remember the very first question that I asked you, like, is there anything that you're thankful about? Or I might just ask you, how do you plan to stay healthy during these times? So to give you an example where you could apply impromptu networking so that you automatically understand what it is. A lot of times we have a workshop arranged or a big meeting arranged where, we're waiting for almost 20 people to join. The meeting is at 5 o'clock. Around 15 people turn up sharp at 5 or even before 5. But there are 5 more people who have still not joined. And I think this is a pretty common scenario, right? It happens, like the earlier meeting might overshoot, or there might be n number of reasons, because of practical reasons, because of which people might not be able to join in time. Now what happens is the 15 people who came in, they came in with really high energy. And if you don't engage them for the earlier 5 or 10 minutes, the energy really fizzles down, which you don't want to do. So what you can do is, and this is also something that I have tried out in various physical conferences, that you just ask the group, whoever is present there, you ask them a random question which is relatable to them, or you just ask them any question which is related to the meeting. So you could say that even before we begin, do you know why have we gathered, or this is the problem and what do you think we should do? Or in my case, if this would have been an activity, I would have said, how do you plan to stay healthy during these times? So find a person whom you don't know already, rule 1, and just share your thoughts with that person in a minute. So I share it with person B. Person B, 1 minute. Person B shares his or her thoughts with me, another minute. So I ring the bell, time is up. I say, now find a new pair and speak with that person. Again, discuss the same question. So you might be repeating it, but every time you get to hear new information about or new ideas about how people are trying to stay healthy. So it might sound boring that you have to repeat what your plan is, but believe me, this helps you in articulating. So a lot of times it happens that you've been thinking about something in your mind, but only when you say it aloud, there are a few things that strike you as well. It's like a eureka moment. That's one. So when you are vocal, when you speak about your ideas, there might be a few things that you also add to it while you're speaking. Even if you don't, then the next time when you're speaking with a person, you realize that, this is something I could add based on the previous thing that I've said. It also helps you articulate better. Like in the first minute, I might just go on and on and on. But then when I meet the second person, I might just say that, I might be a little more crisp in talking. And I think it's a very, very important skill to have, the articulation. So impromptu networking is nothing but you just leave people in a room for the initial 5 minutes or so for whoever's attending, throw a question at them, uh, ask them to discuss it with a pair, and then after a minute, change pairs. Again, after a minute, change pairs. So you could do this for 2 or 3 times or 2 or 3 cycles within 5 minutes. And how does it help? One is definitely it helps engage people and not only keep the energy level of the room constant, but rather increase it because there's been a lot of activity. Also, it's a good break. So usually people come from different meetings, or they might have come from home where they're already thinking about a lot of things. So it is like a mental switch. They turn off from what they've been thinking, and now they're in that space, even it's a virtual or a physical space. So that's one biggest advantage that I see. You get to meet new people. You get 2 or 3 opportunities to articulate and hone your skills. Of course, I spoke about this. It initiates immediate participation. Okay. It attracts deeper engagement, of course. It helps shy people warm up because you're just talking to one person at a time. Uh, it invites stories to deepen as they're repeated. The same point that I mentioned, that you might add more things to your story as you repeat it with person 1 and 2 and 3. And suggest you might get suggestions on those small things which might make a big difference, which is the theme of this talk. And the last and the most important is it helps you unleash the power of loose connections. So when you meet someone for a minute, especially in a conference, you might not get enough time to speak about that person, but at least you've been forced to meet a new person and it has created a loose connection. So you at least know that person. You might bump into that person during lunch or during some other session, and you might continue with that conversation. So you were forced to meet, but then you might continue or you might leverage on that new connection. So this is the benefit of impromptu networking, which is the second structure that we saw. The third one, and I think this kind of forms a basis of a lot of structures, a lot of activities, which is called as 1, 2, 4, and all. Let's understand this with the help of a diagram. And you might have to excuse my drawing skills. I don't think I'm very good at it, but I've given it a shot. Let's see if you understand. So the question that I would have for you, if we would have done this in a physical setting or as an activity here as well, is what is the intention? Think about what is the intention of you attending this session, and what is it that you plan to do with the information that you've learned, right? Because gaining knowledge is one, but practical implementation is another point. So think about what would you do with the information that you've gained from this session. So 1, 2, 4 all necessarily is, and this is my art. Uh, so imagine that you have a group of around 10 to 12 people. And as I mentioned, you could do it with like n number of people. So step 1 is what you do is you throw a question at them and you give them 1 minute to individually introspect about that question. Like what is it that they think about the problem or the question that you've posed. So once the minute is up, and as a facilitator, you would keep time. So once that 1 minute is up, the next thing that you would do is you ask them to pair. So this is similar to what we did in impromptu networking. So this person, so out of the 10 to 12 people that I have here, these two people have formed a pair now, if you can see my cursor. And this pair would discuss the same question. So this person is going to talk to the next person about his or her ideas, and vice versa is true as well. And you give them around 2 to 4 minutes, like 1 to 2 minutes each. You keep a timer, and once time is up, then the next thing what you do is you merge two pairs together. So this pair and this pair have merged to form a group of 4. Now, in a group of 4, what you would do is you would discuss this same question, and you just try and identify, like, this person or this pair, only one person talks about it, like this is what we discussed, like a summary. And likewise from this pair as well, one more person talks and says that this is what is the summary. And then after that they discuss, what the similarities between our solutions are, or what the differences between what we've proposed are. And you might give them around 4 to 5 minutes to have that group discussion. And that eventually, uh, considering that you had like 12 people in the beginning, you would have 3 groups each of 12 people. And what you do is you just invite one insight or one idea from all the groups. So eventually you would have 3 ideas. So what happened is, within a period of 12 minutes, like 2 minutes, 1 minute here, and 4 minutes here, 4 minutes here, and then again giving 1 minute to each, within a time span of 10 to 12 minutes, you were able to scan the entire room. And the entire room has participated in this activity, and good ideas automatically start surfing, and they eventually come to this level. So this is nothing but 1, 2, 4, all. The name sounds fancy, but 1, you think individually, 2, you pair with someone, 4, you form a group of 4, and then eventually you talk about it. Now, where is it that this can be used? So a lot of times what happens is, you give an awesome session and you ask people, like, do you have any questions? And probably there might not be any questions at all. Your session might be awesome and crystal clear, but otherwise you do expect that you've been asked, like, it would have been nice if someone asks those questions, or someone can even give comments on how the session was and show some interest. So what you could do is, imagine you have a group of 100 people, spare the last 10 minutes for this activity, 1 to 4 all, and then just throw a question that, pick one insight that you got from this session, do 1, 2, 4 and all, and at the end of 10th minute, just invite groups to share that one insight. You might not have the time to talk to 25 groups and get ideas, but just pick 5 groups, whoever is interested, and within 5 to 10 minutes, what happens is you get a nice summary, or get a nice summary of insights that people have got from your session. And eventually you might realize that you spoke about something with a different intention, but people have really picked on some insights which even you would not have thought about. So it's a learning for you as well. So this is all about 1, 2, 4 and all. A lot of liberating structures are used in sequence, and I can tell you how, but this forms a basis of a lot of activities. And how has it helped? Like, as a speaker, if I was trying to solve a problem, I did not do a lot of speaking. All the people were engaged, all the speakers, all the people spoke, and I was just facilitating it. And at the end as well, people are giving their insight rather than just one person speaking. It helps make new connections, of course. It identified each other's need. It sampled the entire room. Like I said, good ideas automatically start surfacing. And rather than having big groups, you had small cells which generated these ideas. And it revealed a lot of hidden facts. And of course, it was fun as well, because you kind of gamified your experience. So this is all about 1, 2, 4 and all. The next liberating structure is Troika. It's a very, very simple concept, but it works wonders. I will explain Troika again with a group of, with a diagram that I've made. So Troika works with 3 people. person A, B, and C. Let's give them this name. Person A here is a client. Imagine he's a client and he's come to you with some problem. And person B and C are consultants. So these are the people who are experts in giving solutions. So step one, the client says, I'm facing this problem and I really don't know what to do about it. I'm stuck. Can you please help me? What person B and C do is they listen to the problem very patiently and they ask any clarifying questions. For example, if they've not understood anything or they ask for more examples, they don't give the solution yet. So person A talks about the problem, person B and C, who are the consultants, ask any clarifying questions. Now what happens is this activity takes around 2 to 3 minutes, like talking about the problem and asking any clarifying questions. Step two, the client turns around. So now the client's back is towards B and C. So the client, that is person A, can't see person B and C, but person B and C can see each other. So what they do is they start discussing about the client's problem, and they give each other suggestions, they agree and disagree on things, but eventually person A is listening to the entire conversation. Two things. A lot of times it does happen that you have a problem and someone tries to give a solution and you're so impatient that your body language conveys it. You just don't want to listen. This way, what happens is person B and C are not able to see person A's body language if he's getting impatient or he's making faces or he's really appreciating it. So they're not influenced by what person A thinks and his body language for now. And they are liberally trying to flow out as many ideas as they can think about to solve that problem. Likewise, person A is also not able to see the person B and C's expression. And this will take around 2 to 3 minutes. Step 3, person A turns around again, and now he or she tells what insights he or she has got from this discussion. It might be a possibility that nothing was of use, but it might also be a possibility that few of the things were which person A had never thought about, because as humans, when we are in a problem, we are deep down into that problem and we're not able to see it from a distance and think about it neutrally, which person B and C were able to do. So you repeat this where person B becomes the client and then person C becomes the client. So just to summarize, you have a client, you have two people. Client asks the question and B and C are giving solution. This might sound really simple, but it works wonders. And I've tried this couple of times and it really, really helps with your listening skills, which is what this is about. You get practical help about the challenges that you're facing, and that too immediately. And a very nice quote that I've got from the Liberating Structures website. So this is the picture which actually tells you the arrangement that I tried to show in my stick diagram. So these are the two consultants whom I spoke about, and this is the client. So this is step 2, where the client has already shared the problem, and now the two consultants are trying to talk about solutions, and the client is trying to make notes. And a beautiful quote is, it's very hard to listen, and I think all of us try and work on our listening skills, because it asks us so much interior stability that we no longer need to prove ourselves by speeches, arguments, and statements. True listeners no longer have an inner need to make their presence known. They're free to receive, which is what Troika is all about. And a few benefits I would say is you're unleashing local wisdom. You need not get experts every time. Someone might come with a eureka idea which you might not have been able to think about. That doesn't make you dumb. It's just that you're so deep into that problem that you don't see the obvious things which someone else might be able to see. Of course, you refine a lot on your listening skills. The consultants refine a lot on their consulting skills. and you create conditions for unimagined solutions. Of course, we spoke about this. And yes, the most important thing also is you learn to formulate your problems, because when you're talking about your challenges, you first have to think very clearly before you convey the challenge to someone. And it happens a lot of time that there's a lot of clutter in your brain because you're constantly thinking about the problem. But once you start telling it to someone, you yourself have a solution, because now you're thinking aloud and you have understood the problem well. And a lot of times it is said that, Einstein had once said that if I have a problem, I will spend 95% of the time in articulating and understanding what that problem is, and only 5% in solving the problem. And I think understanding the problem is very, very important. I think all of us understand that most of us are into product building, into service building, and understanding a client's problem is the most important thing to do. Solution comes later. And this is one of the biggest benefit. So we studied two, Troika and 15% solution, and these two go really well. Just to give you an example, uh, think about what is the biggest challenge you're facing right now. Think about your 15% solution. As a client, share it with people, with the two consultants. Turn around and let the consultant tell you whether your 15% solution is good or whether you can add something to it. So these liberating structures, these 30 plus structures are like alphabets, and you can form words, even sentences from these alphabets. So you can mix and merge them. You can have one before the other, and you can have like a beautiful workshop planned out of it as well. What I've given here are a few resources. This is the Liberating Structures website. Feel free to take a screenshot. The book is available on Amazon. This is the link. It's a pretty costly book, but the app is free. It's available on the Google phones and iPhone as well. And it is a beautiful app. So to understand liberating structures, is it necessary that you read all the 30 plus structures? Probably not. You don't have to do that. What you just need to do is you should know what these structures are on a very high level, and the app can help you with that just by giving a summary of each. And for example, now if you want to do a retro, then the app will tell you for retro, these are the ones that you could use. And then you just pick one and read it in detail. And the details are also very simple. They'll explain the 5 elements that we spoke about, like how do you invite people, how do you set up a space, how is it that participation is distributed, and how will it help you. And also a few case studies, by the way, of how it has helped people, and a few videos as well. The website is also awesome. It talks about a lot of things in detail, and it's, of course, it's free. As a BA, of course, I said I have to plan a lot of workshops. So what I've done is I've just collated how each of these can help you in different ways. Like if you want to do a ways of working session, you could use impromptu networking that we just spoke about, or there's something called as minimum specs. If you want to do a session to define your definition of done, then again, you could use something. If you sprint planning, then these are the few that you could use. Of course, I've not covered like fishbowl, user experience, and conversation cafe, but you can read them in the same way that I just spoke about, and they're like really very, very easy to use. For daily stand-ups as well, you could use this format and sprint review. So you can take a screen grab of this as well. And I think this is a very, very useful slide wherein you can have these liberating structures lined up one after the other to achieve like some awesome results and run some great workshops as facilitators. And the last slide that I have here is around retrospective. So you can have your retrospectives run in multiple ways. Of course, these are a few that either I have tried or my colleagues have tried. And once you go through liberating structures, you can keep adding to this. And it's like alphabet, right? You can form your own words out of it.
Richa, just to give a heads up, we have another 9 minutes.
Perfect.
If you want to take any questions, feel free to.
Yeah, sure. I think I'm almost towards the end. Thank you. And The last reference that I have is this is again from a wonderful book called as Atomic Habits by James Clear. So it talks about the power of tiny gains or power of small changes. So as I mentioned, something really very small every day might sound not very difficult, because as human we don't want to get out of our comfort zones, and a big change is always very difficult. But if you break it down, if you make those small changes, and if you have those tiny gains, if you look back, you've come a long way, and this is that long way. So if you just be 1% better, if you do something which changes things 1% better in a positive direction, you would be around 37.78% better than the version of yourself, if you're taking an example. And the vice versa is also true. Of course, this is not to scare you, but this talks about how tiny habits or small gains or small changes can make a huge impact. That's pretty much from me. I would end with a beautiful quote again from the book Liberating Structures. It's by Rabindranath Tagore. That you cannot merely cross the sea by standing and staring at the water. You have to get in it. So where do you start with liberating structures? You can start today. No special training required. And you can't learn about them just by knowing them. You can learn about them by practicing them. And you can start really small. Just try and apply it in the next stand up that you attend or a next meeting that you attend and see the change for yourself. These are my contact details for any information that you want. And I would be happy to answer any questions on all of these forums, or I am happy to take few questions as well now that we have around 7 to 8 minutes.
Richard, some of them are asking for the link for the app. Is it possible to post it on the chat window?
Yes, sure. Let me do that.
Yep.
I'm posting all the links for the book as well as, here you go.
Great. So I request participants to post in any questions. We have another 5 minutes for the session to end.
I see there's a question. How do we break silence if we conduct a retro? I would say start with impromptu networking. If the team is really, if the team really doesn't talk, don't throw a question which is related to work or stuff. Just talk about anything under the sun, like how was the weekend and stuff, or something that might be relatable, and get people talking. There are a few other liberating structures as well where you get people to draw. You could use those.
There's another question which says the mix and match will obviously take some time. Is there any faster way?
Like the mix and match of liberating structures, is that what you meant?
Yes, I think it. Yeah.
Cool. As a beginner, I would suggest that you start with small, because we're talking about small changes, big impacts. And to be honest, it's not necessary to mix and match forcefully. If you're able to achieve what you want just by one structure, so be it. Just use it. Uh, Mix and match was suggested for workshops. Like as a BA, I have to run full day workshops or 2 hours workshops, 4 hours workshop, and I can't keep on repeating the same activity, right? And that's the reason I plan them in a sequence and I mix and match things. But you can begin small, of course. And once you get a hang of it, then you can start mixing and matching by yourself.
Okay, the second question is, what is the best way to keep everyone involved?
Start using liberating structures.
Absolutely.
Start with the simplest ones.
The next question is, as we are now in a virtual world, any sessions for productive retrospections?
Sorry, any sessions for?
Any suggestions for productive retrospections?
Yes. So there's one concept here which is called as appreciative interviews in liberating structures. So what it does is it talks about what are the things it focuses on success stories basically. So that is where you start with a productive retrospective, wherein you can ask, in spite of everything that has happened, in spite of us working from home, what is it that we've done well and that we're really proud of as a team. So that is where people get started. So you start on a successful note, and then people themselves are really, really interested in sharing other experiences as well. So that's one. Second is a very, very interesting retrospective, uh, which you say that, Dr. Evil has taken over the world and everything bad is happening. So now, if you're running a project, what is the worst that could happen with that project? Ask people to write down everything, and people come with really funny responses like, the project might shut down, we might not get funding, there would be a bug in production, and the system sits. And then let them come out with these plans. And then second, you ask, now think about what are the things that we do from this list in any shape or form. What are the things which are relatable to this? And the third thing that you do is then devise action plans to stop doing the things that we've been doing. And this is also one liberating structure, which makes the conversation fun and at the end productive as well. And people don't shy away from coming up with really weird things of how you could fail.
Right. I just have two more questions. Can we apply liberating structures in our personal life?
Yes, of course. So 15% solution could be a good example to begin with. Like, what is the best that you could do to solve your problem? You need not do it with a group, you can do it for yourself. But if you want to do it in your family setting, there's no harm. And I've seen people doing their own Kanban boards, teaching Kanban boards to children. So we're already applying the principles that we use in our work life at home. Why not try this as well?
Sure. Last question. Will impromptu networking work well for groups of people who are working for a long time, or group of people who don't know each other?
So the people who don't know each other, definitely yes, because you are creating those loose connections and they can talk to each other later. For people who already know each other, throw questions which highlights an aspect of that person which the other person might not know. So
Okay.
it would still be useful, but try and articulate your questions in a way. Like, for example, we've been working with our teams for very long, but we might not really know a lot of personal details if people are happy to share. So try articulating questions around those, and people would still talk in spite of working with each other for a long time.
Sure. I think we've come to the end of the session, so we won't be able to take any more questions. So on behalf of all the participants, volunteers, and the chair, I'd like to thank Richa for a fabulous session. I think we're already receiving a lot of excellent feedback, a lot more questions. Sorry, we won't be able to answer it at this moment, but you could still reach out to Richa. She shared her contacts. So thanks again for joining. Thanks, Richa.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for being such a wonderful audience. Stay safe. Bye.
Pleasure. Thank you.